Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture, and the rogues who create it every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on Facebook.com/Rogue Wave Podcast. Download it immediately following the live stream on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, anywhere podcasts can be consumed. We are on it. Search Rogue Wave Podcast without an E or go to roguewavepodcast.com to subscribe on Apple Podcast. Again, wave without the E. Tonight, The Burning Questions, Umbrella Academy, Season 3. What's that going to look like following Season 2? And do they have a hit on their hands? Tron 3, DC Fandome, X-Men Animated Revival. We fire up the gas meter. And New York Comic-Con no more, and DC layoffs are a bloodbath. I am your host, Michael Dolce, as always, joined by my cohort extraordinaire, Mr. Hassan Godwin. How you doing, sir?
It's another Wednesday, another quarantine Wednesday.
It is, but you know what? I shower for Wednesdays, and that's a good thing. It gives me a benchmark with which to dress up and shower. Well, I know because we're doing the show. So it fires me up, you know.
Yeah, but you don't shower on the.
Oh, I do, but it's just it's very sporadic at best because every day is the same day, and
your poor wife. You sporadically shower.
We are just consistently in a it's the same day over and over again. So
it is. We are definitely living in. Oops, that's terrible. We are definitely living in. Groundhog's Day syndrome.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. It is definitely that way. It's the amount of times I log into YouTube with the hopes that there's something different there in my recommends. You know, maybe there's. You know, it's getting bad. It's really getting bad, and then we're running out of content. We are seriously running out of content. So,
well, we're going to get a resurgence because Bill and Ted's is coming a few days earlier. True. Which is pretty good. New Mutants. So contractually, New Mutants has to be in theaters. So I think that's why they're going to be in theaters, quote unquote. And I think it's going to happen. So as soon as they can drop it, then we can see New Mutants on either HBO Max or Disney Plus. Everyone keeps talking about Disney Plus because Fox owns it, but actually the Fox films go to HBO by contract also. So one way or the other, we'll see New Mutants. We'll do a review whether or not we see it or not. We'll do a review based on everyone else's review if we have to, because we're not going to theater anytime soon. But but Bill and Ted's we'll be in good shape with that. All right, we're gonna begin. We call this segment Rogue Rage, all the rage in the pop culture world. Speaking of content, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and other Marvel Studios shows preparing to resume filming. A new report has revealed that the Marvel Studios shows are gearing up to resume filming in Atlanta. Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan's The Falcon and Winter Soldier was originally set to debut this month, but the series won't make its original premiere date due to the pandemic. But with a few more weeks of work left, it's getting ready to resume production. So I would say we'll see it. You know, I guess it would be maybe the wintertime, 2020. Worst case 2021, which, hey, we're 8 months in now. You think that's
going to come out? You think that's actually going to come out in 2020?
I would say because they don't have a lot of filming left to do. Theoretically speaking, think about the timeline, right? It stopped filming in March, April, May, June, July, August. That was 5 months ago. If they resume filming this month, 5 months later, it's still 2021, but it's early 2021. So maybe we'll get it January, maybe we'll get it in February. They might rush it too. I mean, they might rush ahead and say, let's get this thing out because, again, this need for content. So,
maybe we'll see. I would be surprised if it was before the end of the year. Before the new year. If it was in 2020 at all, no matter when even if it was December 31st, I'd still be surprised.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, with any luck, we'll get that.
Of course.
And then, sadly, New York Comic-Con 2020 was the other big news that hit. Being an exhibitor, I actually got my email. So actually, I felt like privileged. I knew something I already knew was going to happen. before everyone else. And I was like, I got to rush to post this.
I told you months ago that wasn't going to happen. You said you did an over and under, right?
Yeah.
About whether New York Comic-Con.
I said 50-50, right? Didn't I say 50-50? It all depended on how well we were able to stem the pandemic, which ironically New York is very good, but I mean, just a situation like that, it's just too
it's attracting people from all over though.
So, exactly. Right. No, exactly. And well, that's the funny part, right? Like that's where we're at right now. New York State has actually imposed a quarantine. So if you were to travel into New York, you have to quarantine yourself for 14 days. It's the same thing like what's happening in New Zealand right now, where basically they've restricted entrance into the island, and they've also restricted, once you do come on, you have to quarantine yourself because that's where the new cases are coming. It's coming from other areas of the country or other areas of the world in New Zealand's case. So that's where we're at. There's no way you can hold an event where people would have to.
People would just take it seriously.
You would go bankrupt. What would be the point of being a vendor if you had to fly in 2 weeks prior and stay in New York? You'd go home negative. I mean, you could make like $10,000 and still like be in the red.
Not only that, you fly in 2 weeks prior and have to put yourself up room and board and whatever.
That's what I'm saying. You'd still be in the red.
Well, no, and then the show, would be a lackluster show because I really wouldn't believe attendance would be that big. It would probably be big in comparison to other things, but it would not be big comparatively to other years of NYCC. And a lot of people would be coming. They pay the extra money. They go through the extra expenses because they're going to get that NYCC crowd, and you just wouldn't get it.
I know.
So
I know. New York is an expensive show. Like if I didn't live here, I would still do it. I still make the most money, but part of the reason I make the most money is I don't have to do room and board. I would have to do parking, and I figured out a system which doesn't work right now because there's a homeless shelter where my parking strategy used to be.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. But anyway, like I said, it would be very.
I remember that pier, man. I remember when there was nothing down there for years and years and years. And then the last few years I went down there, I'm like, there's a whole new city down here, man. There's like thousands of new residents. However, they've made it so easy to get there by train now.
Yes.
They made it astonishingly easy to get there by train.
Hudson Yards, man. It was great. Yeah.
That's and I was like, oh my God, this is the first convenient thing I've ever experienced in New York City.
So here's the ironic thing. That was supposed to be the Jets stadium also. But they couldn't come to an agreement on that. And I think MSG fought it. Like there was some other factions. So that whole area then ended up just being super developed.
Yeah.
And now
that whole downtown area,
no one can afford to live there, or no one wants to live there. Anyone who can afford to live there is like, we're going to Connecticut. Like we're out of here. Like we're good.
That whole downtown area didn't want it though. I remember I remember even Crisula from Starlight. Who we've had on the show. I remember she was passing around a petition. People in that area just didn't really want there to be a Jet stadium. It was a big deal.
Right.
It was a big
but they ended up developing it anyway. So one way or the other, development is good because that was literally, it was bad for my parking. Again, that used to be my parking because I could park there for free because no one parked there. And there was nothing there. There was literally nothing there. Over the years, it's been piling up. But I don't think they want to hear about our parking situation. Sadly, New York Comic-Con goes. What do you predict? Let's say Baltimore is usually the end is end of October, early November. That's probably that's got to be gone, right? I don't think that's going to happen.
Probably, yeah. I predict there's no major convention.
I would say 2020 is out.
It's shot.
Yeah, C2E2 is late March in Chicago.
That if it happens, that would probably be the first volley of things getting back to normal.
Yeah.
If we don't have a C2E2 in March, then we're going to lose probably half of 2021 as well. That'll be an indicator.
I think so too. All right. Well, we don't want to be depressing. So in order to make it exciting, I developed a new segment for us. Are you ready for this? This is the gas meter. We've got a bunch of little news that kind of trickled in outside of the big news of New York Comic Con. And even the Falcon and Winter Soldier was kind of little news, but it didn't fit the segment. So it's our pop culture gas meter. I'll let people figure out what the gas part of it is. But I'm gonna read you off 3 things that.
As long as it's not flatulence, then everything is fine.
Maybe it is GAS. I don't know. Figure it out. Figure it out. And you're gonna tell me whether you're empty or full on this news that I'm gonna tell you. And then I'm also gonna
clever. Okay.
You like this? I know, right? This is what happens in a quarantine. All right. First item of news. Suicide Squad star Jared Leto officially confirms Tron 3 role. This is from Monday. Disney has tapped Lionhelmer Garth Davis to direct Tron 3. Jared Leto has revealed he is indeed attached to the long-gestating project. Leto has been rumored since March of 2017. Back then, Disney was said to be developing the project as a reboot instead of a sequel to 2010's Tron Legacy, with Leto playing a character named Eris. He went to his official Twitter page to confirm his involvement, saying he is struck with gratitude for the opportunity to bring this movie to life. Your gas meter, empty or full on this news?
Halfway.
Okay.
Because
you're half a tank.
Half a tank. Yeah.
Let's get the puns going, my man. You're half a tank on this.
Half a tank because I'm happy that the franchise is still viable.
Mm-hmm.
Unhappy that it's not a sequel. It's going to be a reboot. Nobody needs a reboot. Just continue it the way it does and do it better. You know.
Name me a successful reboot lately. What can you? And this is I'm just coming up with something out of thin air, because obviously when the words reboot come to a franchise, Ghostbusters comes to mind. It was a total flop, right? Like it just didn't do well critically and commercially.
I'm trying to think if there was one of the last really good reboots.
What was it?
John Carpenter's The Thing was a really good reboot.
Jeez, I don't even know when that was. When was that?
That was 1982, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any reboots. X-Men First Class, technically.
Not really, because they integrated all of it anyway.
Yeah, so, I know. Reboot would be a clean this didn't happen in continuity. Ghostbusters is the only thing I can think of. If you're streaming us on Facebook.com/RogueWave Podcast, throw some stuff in the comment field, because I'm curious about what a good, if there's been any good reboots. Because quite frankly, then my point being, history repeating itself, this doesn't bode well. It also doesn't bode well Jared Leto entering this sci-fi universe, considering his last sci-fi/comic book universe, considering his last role in this space was the Joker, which was much maligned version.
I would have also said he was in Blade Runner, but that didn't do well either. It's well received. It's an instant classic, but financially it didn't do very well.
Well, Blade Runner wasn't a reboot, though. Blade Runner continued the story.
It was a continuation, but I'm saying it was the last time he was involved in something science fiction. Just going by your criteria.
Yeah. No. So I would sit there and give you I'm empty on this. I got nothing in the tank for this. I was never a big Tron fan to begin with. I didn't see the Jeff Bridges continuation. Some cool special effects from what I saw in terms of.
You didn't hear that soundtrack? You didn't hear that Daft Punk soundtrack, which everybody raves about. I like Daft Punk. Did not listen to that. No. Wow. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just it was so not even. You do this for a living, though. That's the strange thing.
Not the music part. The music part is that's a hobby part.
You interview musicians for a living. All right, never mind.
So you are half tank. I am empty on this. All right, next item in the agenda: X-Men the Animated Series. Producer talks possible Disney Plus revival. One of the producers behind X-Men Animated Series opened up about a possible revival of the fan favorite series of Disney Plus. There's been talks about reviving it since Disney Plus launched. Larry Houston, who worked on the series, discussed the revival on a virtual Wizard World panel earlier this month. There's been plenty of recent conversation around the X-Men, with director James Gunn recently discussing his favorite mutant heroes. Houston explained that talks have only gone as far as letting Disney know the team is available to work on the project. Beast voice actor George Buza explained the whole cast are up to reprise their roles, saying we would all love to do it. It's supposedly one of the better rated shows, I guess, or the most downloaded or most streamed on Disney Plus since the launch.
Hey, look, X-Men animated series was it was an amazing it was an amazing addition to the X-Men, the X franchise. It was a really reinvigorating the whole the viability of it in the mainstream.
Yeah.
I loved the show.
Yeah.
I started to hate the art because I think they cut a lot of corners. They got really lazy. Like the first few episodes are some really stellar art, in the animation, and then after a while it started to get really bad.
You know what was like that too? It was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So when Turtles got successful, they basically were like, you need to stop making like 12 episodes and make 50 episodes. And it's like, all right, how do we do that? Let's just like Krang all of a sudden, like he went from like being like this detailed like brain, like where you could see the lines and everything, to just being like a pink blob. And like the Turtles, like you used to be able to see like the line for their nose. It was very anime style, in fact, which was really awesome. Like if you watched the original Mutant Ninja Turtle series, same thing. So like
the first 5 episodes.
Yeah.
That miniseries is absolutely, even today, even now, it's still one of the best renditions of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ever.
Yes.
But that theme song actually rocked. It still rocks today. And it's the dumbest. It's the most rudimentary theme song. They just mention the name of the show over and over and over.
Turtles,
yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja
Turtle Power.
But that is a really wonderful miniseries, the first 5, and then being a kid when it went full series, which is about 65 episodes, counting, I think the first 5.
Right.
You didn't really notice the quality slippage like you do now.
Right.
Now you do. But when you're a kid, you're just loving it.
It wasn't even just that. It was like the quality of storyline even went down too, because they stopped mining from the comics, and they were just like, let's
just making stuff up
right on the wall.
And Eastman and Laird were going through their own
they were
their own So, but for X-Men, I was a teenager. I was older. I was more mature when X-Men. So I started to notice the quality dippage like firsthand. Like, there was one point where the Blackbird was landing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see my hand. It was coming down. It was trying to land, and literally the animation went like this. The plane literally did a wave. It was like made of rubber. And I remember, and I'm like, you guys had to have done that on purpose.
Yeah, you just
that's not an animation accident. You guys
didn't try.
Yeah, you guys are effing with me right now.
So here's the funny thing, and this is okay. So this is why I'm actually full on this news, which is
you're happy about this, huh?
Which is surprising. What did you say to you? You didn't actually give a where you are.
Not yet, no.
Okay, suspense. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll keep suspense, or we'll skip you, and then the audience will never know. I've been rereading all of those early X-Men comics from that era, and I found I literally just completed. Look what I got online. I mean, this is.
Oh, you got stuff. You got swag.
What's
your swag?
This is stuff. I'll go to full screen.
Yeah, I see. Ooh, New Mutants. Rob Liefeld New Mutants.
Rob Liefeld New Mutants. I found all these things. Look at that. Battling Sabretooth. These used to hang up. These used to hang up on the wall, and they were like $70, $75, $100 for these particular issues. This one especially, because that's when he teamed up with Wolverine.
Yep, I've had that. I've done a recreation of that.
This iconic cover too. I mean, that was
Do you know that the one you just held up, with Wolverine on the cover, is a recreation of a G.I. Joe cover?
Oh, is it really? No, I didn't.
Yes,
know that.
It is. It's because Cable was actually Roadblock holding a 50 caliber machine gun, so it's actually a recreation of a G.I. Joe cover.
An homage.
It wasn't very
not an homage though, because
Feldian.
It does not say after G.I. Joe.
No. So obviously it's not an homage, it's a Liefeld.
You want to know what's really funny? So I posted something I've been posting a couple things on Facebook, and Liefeld has responded to a couple things. Like when I said Cursed, like, what do you think about Cursed? And he gave his opinion, which is awesome. I've met him quite a few times, but he is definitely more elusive, at least in terms of like, developing any kind of like professional relationship.
Right.
I was commenting to Mike O'Neill about the Todd McFarlane documentary, and he actually wrote on my timeline in response to my comment to Mike. But Mike was like, I never got McFarlane. Like, how is he a visionary? How is he this? And I said, he completely changed the toy industry. So in the toy industry, he's a visionary. But then I also said in the comic book industry, he was, and I tried to do this. So Rob, if you're listening, which you're probably not, I tried to do this in a way that was like, I don't really have time to go into this. So I just said he was the artist back then. And he really was. He was one of the artists.
He was.
I mean, but
he was.
I think he was one of the first of that group to really become like the breakout artist, right? I think he got in a little bit before. He definitely got in before. I don't want to say before, but he broke bigger. Liefeld had done a fill-in. He had done Hawk and Dove. He did a fill-in issue of X-Men. So he didn't land New Mutants, until well into McFarlane. Not well into, but McFarlane had been on Spider-Man, I think, in 88 at that point, right? I think 88 was when McFarlane first did Spider-Man, and that's when he started really kind of breaking it. So again, just to simplify things, I said McFarlane was the artist at the time. So of course, Rob Liefeld comments, a lot of artists up for that debate, and some of us outsold said, he basically was kind of taking not a shot at McFarlane so much as a shot at me saying McFarlane was the number one guy. I didn't say McFarlane was the number one guy. I just merely said.
I cannot remember which one of them I noticed first, but it definitely was the age of Liefeld, McFarlane, and Jim Lee. It definitely was. Those were the top three monsters at the time. I don't know if I noticed Jim Lee before Liefeld. Excuse me, Rob. I apologize. I don't know if I noticed. I don't know which of them I noticed first, but I want to say it's simultaneous. But you know. Now my favorites at that time, who were less celebrated, though they should have been, were Mark Silvestri, who I loved. His work I loved.
He's probably the best
still love it.
artist, right?
Yeah, and his work is it's unique,
gorgeous.
Yeah, it's unique and it's gorgeous. It's not a ripoff. It's a completely unique thing, but it's so consistently. Yeah, it's just gorgeous stuff. Especially his X-Men work, like his Inferno, his Inferno series. Well, I like the Wolverine one. He was streamlining his style a little more, but the X-Men stuff, it was epic because the story was Claremont, so the story was epic.
Yeah.
Also, Rick Leonardi,
underrated.
whose stuff, very much underrated, and Walt Simonson, whose work was
not underrated.
He's celebrated, but he's not as celebrated as he should be. His work is tremendous. And those are the ones I noticed when I was young. Right. And then the next guard was like Jim Lee and McFarlane. McFarlane was the one who was really pushing the envelope in page design, right? And in stylized and putting style over function, and so I don't know which of them I noticed first, but I do remember that those three were the giant. That was the Trinity.
I mean, I don't
know if you can see that. Can you even?
Oh, I got you.
You see what I'm saying?
Look at that now.
Yeah, yeah, and even they know it because they actually put the two of them together. I will send you the picture. You could post it.
Interesting.
In a second.
That sounds.
But that's
so what a time also, right? Like to have been a comic book fan, and I mean just the level of talent all working on the biggest characters at one time. So this is why I'm all for this revamp, even though I didn't love the X-Men animated series. They created Morph, who didn't exist. Like it was my first experience.
They created Morph to replace Thunderbird because I don't think they wanted to kill a Native American on television at that time.
Well, that's the thing though, right? Like it's the first time in my life I can remember experiencing an adaptation of the source material that was beloved by me and feeling so disappointed by it. so underwhelmed by what they.
So your your tank is empty.
No. My tank was empty in 1990
with the original. With the 1992.
Wow. But now it's like, hey, look, You know what? I'll take a stroll down memory lane any day. What's your gas meter up here? How much do you gas this?
I'd have to. I'm sorry. I'm not doing this on purpose. I'd have to go half tank again.
Half tank. Okay.
Okay. Just because I'd be interested to see, especially a continuation, a sequel to it. Right. Yeah. Classic.
I don't know how they would
Claremont Jim Lee X-Men, because that was their run. That was the essence of their run, right? Yep. But I'm afraid that the nostalgia is gonna roll hard on it, and because they're gonna want nostalgia hits more than actual quality story hits, they're probably going to have the same cruddy animation.
Magneto is gonna be the villain again.
Yeah, I can't deal with it. Now, if you want, what's really funny is that Sunbow did the famous X-Men pilot that was proposed. Same people who did G.I. Joe, Transformers, or whatever at the time. They did a pilot for X-Men.
Yeah.
Where a lot of things were wrong with it, like Wolverine was Australian, but the animation in that is so amazing, and that is the first time watching that pilot. It was the first time I really thought that Magneto was like an uber villain, was like an amazing Darth Vader-esque villain, and so it was so prominent that when watching the animated series, the series that actually went to series, when they finally introduced Magneto, I was so excited because I remember the preamble to it, the episode before that, where Xavier was like, I know who did this. They came into some disaster area, and he goes, I know who did this because my watch stopped, ticking. And then he dropped the watch, and the watch actually magnetized to his chair.
Yes.
And so he knew it was Magneto. And so I'm like, oh, next episode it's going to be so epic. And again, I'm harping on this one thing. The animation, in my opinion, was so bad that I was literally disappointed with that Magneto. Like, it's night and day, the pilot of the Sunbow X-Men versus the actual execution of the X-Men the animated series. It's orders of magnitude different. So
all right, real quick, last thing on the list. Warner's has unveiled the lineup for DC Fandom. It's August 22nd, answer to Comic-Con. Big names set for the streaming event include Batman's Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson, Wonder Woman 1984's Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot, The Flash's Andy Muschietti and Ezra Miller, Aquaman's James Wan, Suicide Squad's James Gunn, Black Adam's Dwayne Johnson, Shazam's David F. Sandberg and Zachary Levi, and Justice League's Zack Snyder. On the comic side, Brian Michael Bendis, Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, Scott Snyder, and Tom King among them. Also included are creators like Writers Workshop grad Vita Ayala, who's done sporadic work for DC, Christopher Priest, Mark Waid, and a whole bunch of others. There's going to be somehow like Aisha Taylor is part of this as well too. I'm not exactly. And Venus Williams. I don't know, not sure why, but she's going to be there.
All right, that sounds good. That sounds like a worthwhile enterprise.
Yeah, my tank is totally full on this. Plus, it's going to just be a tremendous show for us on the 26th when we can actually talk about all the news. Like, I think DC. So it's interesting, right? We're going to talk a little bit later in the show about the DC layoffs when we do our Spin the Rack segment. Yeah. And a lot of people are spelling like kind of doom and gloom. But I got to be honest, I think this is just a disruption. This is just a disruptive time. Obviously, the pandemic kind of sped things along. This is something that I think was bound to happen in general. I'm not saying it's going to be good or bad. I have no idea what the outcome, what the execution of this is going to end up being. We know graphic novel sales are up, right? I mean, at least we've said this on the show. Graphic novels in general up. Comic retailers are not the source of the major sales anymore.
Right.
And again, we'll talk more about this in the Spin the Rack segment.
Yeah.
So the doom and gloom of whether the comic industry is going to go under, I don't know if that's actually accurate because it does make money. It also is the breeding ground for all these major tentpole movies that unfortunately this year we can't consume, but will pretty soon in the streaming sense and all this other stuff. I look at this DC Fandom virtual event and I think they're going to drop all the big announcements. I think they're going to have a ton of newsworthy things that we can get excited for in 2021. I think DC also, think about all like their latest movies, and even bringing back the Zack Snyder cut in a way is a masterful move. I think DC is, it's one of those things where you make fun of a company for so long because they have no equity with you.
Mm-hmm.
But then you kind of leave them alone, and you kind of leave them as an underdog for a little while, and they kind of just do a couple things here and there to kind of put things together. And it's like, oh, this DC Fandom event, or Fandome, whatever, it's going to be. It's Fandom.
Yeah, I've heard reports and stuff like that the layoffs and stuff happened after they had gotten all of their online content for the Fandome. Yeah. So there's going to be people in the Fandome that have been laid off. There's going to be questions from the audience, but this is prior to the layoffs. So they're not going to be any negative questions.
Right.
So it's going to come off as a complete gala event. This sterling gala event of DC dumb, with the, that will probably outshine the news of the layoffs.
Yeah.
And bury the lead on that.
Yeah.
And it's so without celebrating it by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. No, of course.
It was kind of a masterstroke idea to do all this stuff and to procure all this this positive online activity prior to the move you're going to make.
Right.
That's going to give you utterly negative press.
Yeah.
And then they're going to do this Fandom thing where everybody is, celebrating like it's like it's Eden, Garden of Eden kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then, that's gonna kind of outweigh the bad news. It's gonna look like everyone's still got goodwill.
Look, I would sit there and tell you, DC coming up with its own distribution company, breaking free of Diamond, the movies kind of turning themselves around. Like, if this was 5 years ago, a DC online event, I'd be like, all right, I'll cover it. Half tank, empty, sure, why not? Now I'm kind of like, I'm really curious about Ezra Miller's Flash. I'm really curious about
even in spite
Johnson's
of his controversies.
Yeah, no, I'm curious about Matt Reeves' Batman and Robert Pattinson. So Wonder Woman, yeah, I'm looking forward to Wonder Woman because the first one was great. It's like all these things they've seriously stepped up their game. So I'm full tank. What are you? You go half tank on this again? You're just going half tank across the board?
I'm gonna go half tank. Only because I'm not a DC person.
Right.
So it's
I'm not either though. That's why I'm so full tank on this.
Yeah, well, I'm not. So I mean, it'll strictly be a curiosity kind of situation for me.
Okay.
I do like the major, the big three.
Yeah.
Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. I love those characters. I love Batman. But the DC universe in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't gravitate to that like I do Marvel. So as a person in the industry who has an affinity and a love for the industry and wants to see it thrive, I support it 100%, and I want to see it, and I want to partake in it. But excitement for it, especially in lieu of the news that we just got about everything else, and like I said, the political machinations that surround the whole thing, that the way they've done it, the way they've gone about it, and the way the information that we're going to see is going to be, it's not going to reflect the actual behavior of the company and by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
It's got me only half, excited for it, but I am interested. I will partake in it.
All right. Let us know your thoughts. Comment on the Facebook feed. If you're listening to us in podcast form, go to the Facebook page. We always write back. We write back throughout the week. We like to interact with the 5 people that listen to our show. All right. When we come back, Umbrella Academy, the 9 big questions following the ending to season 2, and a look ahead to what season 3 could look like when we return. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave Podcast, talking comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on Facebook.com/Rogue Wave Podcast without an E. Go to RogueWavePodcast.com to subscribe on all major podcasting apps. Okay, last week we did our Umbrella Academy Season 2 review. Here's a cool thing, right? I actually read an article. I read a couple articles. One, I don't know if this is a Stranger Things like hit necessarily in terms of the zeitgeist, but it's a bona fide hit now in terms of for Netflix by Netflix standards and what they would constitute as a hit. It's being
it's perfect storm everywhere. For them though, right?
What's that?
I mean, it was a perfect storm for them because A, they were in a position that they were able to drop it in the midst of the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. So the people are content starved, but then also it's their freshman effort, so people are familiar with them. So no, excuse me, the sophomore effort. So people are familiar with them. And then on top of that, and we'll get into this, I in my opinion, it's superior to season 1. So it's kind of a perfect trifecta for them to
the other thing too is it's
success.
Literally escapist entertainment, right? Just because of the content with time travel, you get to kind of go back, you kind of get to see these characters who you kind of now know because of season 1 kind of messing things up in the 60s. So it's kind of cool, but the 60s itself offers like a safe kind of, I mean, we didn't grow up in the 60s or live in the 60s, but that kind of, graduation type memory where you only look back on things and go, that must've been the best time to live, even though they probably hated living in their time just as much as, everyone kind of hates the present.
Well, and it wasn't that great for everybody.
But well, I agreed, but I mean, I'm just saying in general, like people tend to look back on the 60s and say like, this is a, like a, just compared to today, right? Everyone's
pivotally like a very,
I don't think there's a decade that has rocked.
No, not that. I mean, we haven't seen anything like it. I mean, we've come close. I'd say the 90s were our version of the 60s.
Absolutely.
As pertains to culture and
but the art. 90s we were at peace. Probably post 9/11, the 2000s. There was a Gulf
War. There was a Gulf War in the beginning.
I know, but
there were some things. Somalia. There were a couple of things, but I mean, it wasn't 1960. It wasn't the 90s. Vietnam
ironically,
War.
As much as it reflects the PC culture we live in today, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying it's very hyper reflective of that. Was more like the Roaring 20s because the economy was fantastic for many, many years. I know there was a recession very early on, or an impending recession, but that's actually what got Bush out and Clinton in. Clinton came in, did an amazing job running the country. We ended up with a budget surplus. We ended up with like, all these really great things that ultimately kind of all got washed away when 9/11 happened. But it was a decade of prosperity. The 60s was a decade of, and again, I didn't live it, but I'm just reading the history books, was civil unrest. It's actually more appropriate to today, I think, than back then. So it's interesting.
Well, I wasn't speaking of events. I was just speaking about art and music and stuff like that. We invented various forms of music and art.
You're 100% right. Yes, you're
experimental movie
right.
making. The comic books, like from the 50s, the comic books were invented, but in the 60s they took on a different prominence. They became a higher form of art.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then Marvel had that renaissance in the 90s. Okay. Totally agree with you 100% on that. So being it's a big hit, season 2 ends and basically you're going to get a season 3. I don't think there's any question about that. It's not like when we had Simon Barry on, who's the creator of Warrior Nun, where he's like, well, they know in 3 days if they're going to have it, but they're not going to tell me. I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that we will end up with a season 3.
Yeah.
Brian Abraham last week actually asked on the Facebook feed what my thoughts of season 2 was. And for the most part, we leaned on what you had said. Season 2 to me is a far superior Stranger Things season 2. And this is what I mean by that. Stranger Things season 1 was it came out of left field because it was completely original, wasn't based on any source material. I think the creators went in with these long gestating plans for what they would do with this 80s nostalgic horror show that they're trying to create, right? Like it's basically, they sat around in college and this is it had time to ruminate and gestate and build this like incredible thing. Became this overnight success, and immediately they're like, okay, great, do it again for us. And they're like, I don't know what to do. So basically we'll kind of tell the same story, but it's kind of a part 2,
They got into the soap opera drama of the relationships of the kids. Some of the kids got girlfriends. Some of the, it was about Mike and Eleven trying to get back together through the
like that was like
series.
the theme of it, but essentially they were kind of like, what do we do for the main storyline? We basically told our story in season 1.
Yeah, and they turned the one monster into a whole bunch of monsters. Like they went the aliens route. It was like, and
it just kind of felt like a continuation. Umbrella Academy season 2, to me, now it has infinite advantages to Stranger Things in the fact that it's based on source material, so they can literally mine the source material. I don't know now, much like with Doom Patrol, where I got so into Doom Patrol, I actually bought the omnibus for Doom Patrol. I keep looking back here because the Doom Patrol omnibus with Grant Morrison's run is now sitting where I do all my best reading, and it is
on the toilet. It's in your toilet.
I didn't say it. And I'm enjoying that as much as I'm enjoying the show. Umbrella Academy, I will do the exact same thing where I will invest like a
shelf or a desk in there or something like that.
Yeah, but I got 2 kids, dude. I ain't got time for that. I do a podcast like we're living in quarantine, and normally I would say yes. Normally, it's funny. I thought my time was squeezed when I had kids, just plain kids, and life was normal. But I used to get a full 8 to 10 hours a day by myself to work and be creative. Now it's 5-6 hours a day, and it's scrambling. I have to get everything. I have to wake up every day and be as sharp as humanly possible. And it's just that's a tough. It's a tough ask, my man. It's a tough ask.
Yeah, I get your point.
Season 2 to me was very similar to Stranger Things, in that it was basically a continuation, except they had it planned. I mean, this was a planned continuation. It was a planned, part 2. In my mind, I have no basis except my own opinion on Stranger Things. I think Stranger Things kind of blew its load in the first season, and by season 2 was kind of like, I don't know what to do. Here, Umbrella Academy was like, well, we are going to move into season 2. It is a continuation. It is part 2. You basically watched all of season 1 to A, establish the characters, and B, establish that Vanya was more than what she appeared, and C, that she's going to be the cause of the apocalypse. Now we get to kind of tell that story without that baggage. So yes, I agree with you in many ways. It was superior because you got to, you already kind of understood all these characters. You understood their backstories. You understood, that Victor, that Luther loves, what's her name? Rumor girl. Allison. And, you understand 5. You understand what the commission was, as opposed to that was also the mystery in season 1.
There's a lot of heavy lifting in season 1 to world build.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So in many ways, I do agree with you. I don't think it's any better, though, or worse than season 1. I enjoyed season 1. I enjoyed season 2 just as much as I enjoyed season 1. I think there's some neat characters that I enjoyed better in season 2 than season 1. Diego being, number 1, because I found him to be very annoying at the beginning of season 1. By the end of season 1, you kind of get he does what good writing should do, is he gives your character an arc, and he ends up in a different place than when he was, and he retreats to that a little bit when he regresses. But the choices he makes to go and become a drug addict again or whatever, or in season 2 where he binges on alcohol because he wants to escape the pain of what was going on. Like, at least you understand that, and you understand that's in his nature and it's in his character. But he again eventually kind of comes through. So I thought season 2 had better character arcs for a lot of them. Luther especially, had a better character arc. 5 has been consistently just enjoyable. I love him as this annoying little kid.
He's an amazing character because he could not work really easily. It'd be really easy for him not to be able to work, for him to be too overly obnoxious to be likable in any way.
Right.
But I think, again, season 2 doing it better than season 1, in my opinion. They really leaned into fleshing out his character. They got the tone correct, and he was a lot more sympathetic, I think, in season 2.
Yes.
Like when he when he decides that instead of chafing against the family unit, he decides, no,
yes.
we have to be together as a family unit to be able to do these things. So, I agree with you. I think 5 was fantastic, and I think it's an accomplishment because that could have been a disaster. That character.
I think what season 2 also does, and it's cool because you this could go really poorly, right? And I kind of felt this way when they first got dropped off in the 60s, and it's like, and when 5 witnesses the apocalypse again, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Now, mind you, the title of the episode was "Here We Go Again," or "Here we're right back where we began," or whatever the case is.
Hung
so
a lantern on it.
And I understand your gripe from last week in terms of season 1 never answered the question, right? The question was still, the world's going to end now. How does it do it? So it could have went poorly. What Umbrella Academy does, in my mind, for time travel stories, it at least functions the way I think time travel is supposed to work, where there are, ramifications. It's not a parallel universe kind of scenario. It actually steals from the mainstream, which was my comic in 2018, where there's only one time stream, but that's okay. It's all right. Umbrella Academy.
Okay.
Two people can have the same thoughts, especially on grand scale such as that.
Sure.
But it does, where 5 is like, no, if I go back here, then this impacts this, and if I go back here, then this impacts this. If we all go back, then this never happens. So it doesn't take time traveling for granted, and at the same time, it doesn't like distort my head. Like Lost to me was kind of leaning in on that theory that time is not linear, and so stuff that happens is it's still like you have this like long string, and even just trying to explain this has just given me a slight headache in this exact moment that I tried to explain it. Whereas I'm watching Umbrella Academy and I go, well, won't the apocalypse still happen? No, I guess it won't happen. Yeah, because if they disappear, then it won't happen. And so it answered enough questions quickly enough as I'm going along in terms of time travel.
It's linear storytelling. It's like non-linear storytelling, but told to you in a manner that didn't give you a headache, that didn't make you crazy. Like, unlike, in my opinion, Legion, which started to mess with me after a while, and so I mean, I think it was brilliantly done, but after a while, you get tired of second guessing the material that you're watching.
Exactly. No, and that's the point. I never at one point stopped and pulled out. Like in the first season of Umbrella Academy, there wasn't that moment, but there was that moment of where Luther, is with Vanya, and he doesn't trust her, and he locks her up, and I'm like, dude, that's the worst thing you possibly could do. But at the same time, it's like when in Infinity War, Chris Pratt's character, leans into Thanos and what Thanos is doing and pulling at his strings about killing Gamora, and you're like, Star-Lord, no!
Yeah.
You're like, all right, but at least I understand. Like, it's still stupid.
Yeah,
and then you sit there and go, like, well, if that was me, I wouldn't have made that decision. But then, obviously, if that was me,
kind of a weird thing, though. I don't know why it works for that, because 2 scenes earlier, he tried to kill Gamora himself. So it's it's really weird that it still works. It's still effective, even though it almost seems contradictory.
Right.
But is that it works.
Right.
Like, so you understand the situation.
Yeah, and so it all works for me, and it all doesn't bend my head. And the commission is fascinating. I think Reginald, the dad, dad is amazing. I think all these things are like, there's plenty of room for what comes next. All right, so that's what we want to lean in real quick. We've got a couple minutes here. Here's 9 burning questions. Who the hell does the Sparrow Academy think it is? But also, who the hell is the Sparrow Academy? This is from Screen Rant. In what other ways will the timeline be affected? Okay, we don't want to answer these questions right now. I just want to give the questions and let the audience kind of think about these questions. And then I'm going to read you an article from Den and Geek that kind of expands on this. Where's Lila? What's the deal with Reginald Hargreave? What's up with Harlan? Should we be worried about another apocalypse? That's a main point of the next article. Is Klaus's cult still active? What will the commission look like now? And did anyone else tear up when everyone piled into the car to help Vanya? Because the Hargreaves are siblings, may have problems, but really they love each other so much. That really wasn't a question so much as a declaration. All right, this is from Den and Geek. There's no denying season 2 provided plenty of closure. for the immediate dangers of Vanya's explosive power, which was at the center of both apocalypses. However, even though the Hargreaves siblings are no longer displaced in time, there's plenty of conflict left to resolve. Season 3 won't return for a while, especially considering they can't really... Well, actually, no, they can film again now. But we can take some educated guesses as to where things might be headed. First off, the likelihood of the 5 witnessing another world-ending scenario. God, I hope not. Now, this is where things could flip, right? In my Stranger Things analogy. Stranger Things 3 blew me away because the writers sat down and actually became inspired and did something uniquely different in terms of a plot, in terms of a story engine, while building off of what they already did, but not copying what they already did. It wasn't a carbon copy of what they did. They naturally went to a new place that was exciting with the Russians. But they did it after I thought was a subpar season 2, where they kind of didn't know, my opinion, they didn't know what to do. My fear is...
I actually only felt one episode was subpar in season 2, but I get where you're coming from. I get what you're saying.
I think the overall, story drive to me wasn't as compelling as in season 1.
Fair enough.
My question for season 3 and my concern is, are we going to now split off into some, the apocalypse made for a really great ticking time bomb, but it's also like right? Isn't it like the ultimate thing that you could try to prevent? Like, if it's still at heart a superhero story, right? Like, that's one of the things where, when you build the stakes that high right off the bat, like, what can they possibly do that's this driving force in season 3? I guess the whole time stream can collapse.
There's a ton of things that they can do. I mean, since they went the route in season 2 of really developing those characters as authentic characters in and of themselves and 3-dimensional, like you knew so much about them, and then you found out that there was a lot about them to like by the end of season 2. Yeah. Whereas in season 1, you're like, oh, this is really interesting, but everybody in this place is so messed up. Right. That, it's hard to get on board with anything that they do or they think. It's a completely different atmosphere in season 2. And because they took the time in season 2 to develop their characters, there's a ton of different directions they can go with season 3 that doesn't necessarily have to involve a cataclysmic event as the motivation, trying to stop a catastrophe being their primary motivation. It could be personal. Season 3 can be a personal situation where it's just the Umbrella Academy against the Sparrow Academy, kind of situation. Right. Which is probably where it's going to go. That's like the Hellfire Club and X-Men, or some such circumstance like that. Yeah, it's interesting
to note that those kind of juxtapositions are always... Aren't they just like comforting? Like when you have like your Spider-Man, you have your Venom, you have your opposites. There's just something. There's something from
villains.
Yeah, there's something from a storytelling mindset that just, because it's our own human brains to have symmetry and to have reflections like a yin and yang. It always works.
It's never a Batman show or movie until the Joker shows up.
Yeah, right.
And I only use the Joker as a metaphor for all of his rogues
galleries. Which is really funny, though, if you think about it, because why would a clown be the opposite of Batman? Wouldn't it be like a snake or something, like a bat?
I don't think. See, I think that's a unique thing about Batman. He's not an opposite.
Yeah,
they're actually the same. It's just that one worships order and the other worships chaos. That's the only thing that's different about them. They're both psychotic.
Yeah,
they're both that deep. Crazy. So
the other thing
honestly, who's crazier? Who would you think is crazier? The guy showed up dressed like a clown or the guy who showed up dressed like a bat? Who would you go as Dolce on the lawn of your house going
with a cape? No, anything cape is always crazy. Cape is always crazy. Look, there are clowns walking the streets right now.
Right now. Yeah.
There is no one dressed in a cape. That's not crazy.
And yet, the crazy...
Anybody wearing a cape, if you were to walk on there, you'd be like, I'm not messing with that dude. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And in the madness of comic books, they've made capes the staple of all superheroes, Yeah. They put this guy in a flowing cape on the top of a building next to gargoyles, and you're like, I want to be him. But in real life, if you're on the subway and some guy dressed like a bat
and there's some guy in a cape,
You're
in a heap of trouble.
Yeah, I'm in a world of hurt now. I don't know.
You're in a heap.
I don't know what to do now. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Once you have established, and that's the thing with season 2, they established their characters. So now potentially for season 3, they can now establish their opposites. You know, their polar opposites or their doppelgangers or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
You can have an evil Umbrella Academy or a more duplicitous or underhanded Umbrella Academy.
Right.
To offset the Umbrella Academy, and it will work. If you did that for season 2 instead of season 3, it wouldn't have worked because, in my opinion, they did not properly define those characters in the first season. So, you know, now you know who Allison is, who Luther is, who the Seance is. You have a more you have a broader appreciation for Vanya and her issues. Everybody loves Five. You know, we get to see Ben in the flesh again. You know, so there's a lot of open potential for that. You know,
One last thing that I also appreciated, but this is just a personal thing. Integrating the Majestic 12, which is of UFO lore. I'm a sucker for all those UFO shows. Like I go nuts on them. Especially considering Blink-182 turned out to solve the UFO crisis. Who knew? Who knew the Blink-182 would do that?
Yeah, I did. I always knew.
Well,
back in 1993, you know.
Your money was on that. Your money was on, you know.
Actually, 1997, I was like, these guys.
Tom DeLonge, you're like, that guy.
These guys are going to break it right open.
That guy is gonna open the doors to where the Pentagon
I knew. I was the first to say
UFOs exist.
I was the first to say it.
Well, the Pentagon are a big fan of the music. That's why. But no, all right. Anyway, so Majestic 12 is this rumored cabal of people. It's probably not real, but could be. Who knows? So in season 3, it's a total red herring, and it's totally obvious that it's a red herring, and it's great that it's a red herring. There's something up with the moon, and there's something up with aliens, and it's gonna come in. It's gonna come.
Luther was on the moon in the beginning of season 1,
correct?
So we already know that there's some kind of
So that's
some kind of crazy stuff going on.
To answer my own question, hopefully in my mind, if you're going to up the game, and if Umbrella Academy is really a knockoff of Doom Patrol, and Doom Patrol is really a knockoff of X-Men, or vice versa, aliens played a huge role in the X-Men mythos. So I'm hoping aliens, you know, kind of enter the equation. And it would be interesting, too, because if you think about it, if we're not alone and the time stream is being monitored by the Commission, but maybe it's just the Commission only monitors Earth's time stream, but not the universe's, and maybe time works differently, but, you know, whatever the case is. All right, what do you guys think? Are you excited for season 3? Are you excited for season 2? What did you think? That was our spoiler review, by the way. We forgot to go spoiler, but we usually do that 2 weeks after.
We didn't really spoil much, though. So we're
no, I guess we did. I guess in that regard, I think we did okay.
We didn't technically even spoil the end.
Very true. Very
there
true.
You go.
Look at us go. Tell us what you think. Tell us if you're excited for season 3, what your predictions sure to go wrong are, which we'll do again if we have no content next week. When we come back, we go spinning the racks. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast, talking comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Facebook.com/Rogue Wave Podcast. Go to Rogue Wave Podcast without the E.com to subscribe. We are big fanboys of comics and graphic novels, and every week we like to bring you the inside info on the source material that will make its way onto large and small screen. We call this segment Spinning the Racks. Spin the rack, spin that rack. You know, I there's a lot of things I want to do with this segment, or a lot of things we try to experiment, but nothing above all else. I missed hearing the song last week. We didn't get to do this last week, and I just missed the song. So no matter what this segment becomes or mutates into as we continue to progress this show, that song is never going away. That is gold.
What a joy.
Gold.
It fills my heart with warmth.
Gold.
Anyway.
DC
what are we
layoffs,
talking about today?
Reportedly a bloodbath. This was, again, we touched upon it in the first segment, in our Rogue Rage segment, in our gas segment, which was our gas meter. Fantastic. That was,
can't tout
pop
your
culture
own
gas meter.
You can't tout your own cleverness, man. Humility.
Total accident.
Humility.
What is humility? All right. Well, this is from Bleeding Cool. I don't have all the names of DC staffers who were let go confirmed. This is a bloodbath, so it actually this was confirmed. Sorry. Editor-in-Chief Bob Harris, SVP Publishing Strategy and Support Services Hank Canals, Bobby Chase, and editors Brian Cunningham, Mark Doyle, and Andy Curie were let go. The latter two were key to the Black Label initiative that seemed to be making money, so it was a bit of a shock. Sorry, this is from Comics Beat. In addition, VP of Marketing Creative Services Jonah Weiland has been laid off. Word of the layoffs first surfaced publicly in a tweet. And these were all confirmed layoffs. We kind of talked about this. Who's left besides Jim Lee? It's Marie Javins, Michelle Wells, and Nancy Spears. Here's the thing about this list of folks that got laid off.
To shout out to Brian Cunningham. Please land on your feet, brother.
Yes, we will. We will definitely do that. Well, I actually want to talk about him in general, just because he's the only one we personally know. He was instrumental at Wizard Magazine. So
yes, he was
when he was there, and he was one of the nicest guys, one of the best staffers.
Really good
he was
man.
Truly a gem in the editorial office. So yes, we do wish him well. What I was going to say though, Bob Harris, Hank Canals, Brian Cunningham, these were like a who's who of the comic industry in the 90s and 2000s. I mean, Giants. Staples. Bob Harris has now been fired as editor-in-chief of both Marvel and DC. That's an amazing accomplishment. No joke. All joking aside, actually,
if you look at the positive side, he became the editor-in-chief of two of them. Yeah,
major
the
comic book. The only two major. I mean, that's actually tremendous. Jim Shooter. It's not like Jim Shooter was the editor-in-chief of DC. And he was Tom DeFalco was the name that I always recognized. Now Joe Quesada is the head of Marvel. Look. Bottom line is, you are lucky in life if you get to go out on your own terms, right? If you get to say, I'm going to walk away. I've had the honor of never being fired. I've actually never been fired, which is great. I've always been able to leave a position, and that's all you can ever ask for, right? You kind of want to make the welcome. You don't want the door to hit you on your way out, kind of thing. You want to be even if it's out of your hands, right? I mean, this is more of a restructuring. They sold DC, Warner Brothers, merged with AT&T. Changes are coming, but this happens in corporate America all the time. So, it's not something that we're celebrating.
It's not a safe environment. You're never in a safe environment in corporate America.
Unless you own your own stuff. And even then, you might not be fired.
You get bought out.
You might have to close your doors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, you might have to close your doors. The demand for your
But even if you're an IP owner, whatever you've done could generate such interest that whatever your board of directors or the creative the administrative wing of whatever you're trying to do could actually just buy you out and push you out of the I mean, you get tremendously compensated, but if you don't want to be out, that's the same as being fired, So I mean, you're not safe almost no matter what you do. It's just the nature of the it's the nature of the beast.
Well, this started with Dan DiDio leaving earlier in the year, back when things were normal, right before C2E2, which again, if I knew that was going to be the only show I could go to, I would have stayed there a week. I would have just hung out with creators from like Wednesday to Monday. I wouldn't even have, and I know that's not a full week, but that's a week enough for me, but I would have blown my entire traveling budget, which is in surplus this year because I didn't.
Well, yeah, hold on to it because next year's going to be a circus.
Oh yeah, but it's amazing.
Going to be a wild ride.
I mean, who would have guessed that would have been it? But anyway, Dan DiDio got let go way back then, so you knew changes were coming. Jeff Johns is not necessarily in the same position in the movie business as he was when things started. And look, we said in the first segment, and I'll reiterate for those who stuck around, we see a lot of this disruption, and immediately our minds go to the negative. And it is negative for the individuals that got let go. And we're not celebrating that, nor would we. I don't, again, I wouldn't. But you look at what DC's done, getting their own distribution company, successfully doing it. I know retailers have kind of griped, but the main source of graphic novel publications now of sales is not comic retailers. There was a graphic I saw the other day. It's not go back 20 years ago, comic book retailers were your number one priority. Now it's bookstores, online sales, digital sales. I mean, you have a whole host of other options now. So change is always a tough thing for people to handle. It always, and look, we do it all the time. Like, we lean on what came before. I mean, look, we talked about how excited we could be for the X-Men animated series to come back. Those characters aren't even the characters that can be found in the books right now.
Nope.
So we're looking for like a hearkening to better days or the past, or we glamorize the past as always being great. This is a disruption that could have a happy ending to it. The film and TV department seems to have righted itself. They seem to have embraced what they are and are creating and telling stories that are palatable. They're not trying to be a Marvel, knockoff of Marvel Studios knockoff anymore. The comic book end of things, well, if Diamond ever shuts down, DC has its plan now for distribution, right? It just does. And even Diamond...
It was a mistake. Diamond made a mistake. I think either Diamond did this on purpose to get out of that situation.
Nope.
Or they overestimated their importance in the grand scheme.
Well, you know what the funny part is? Diamond, what Diamond failed to do was grow as well, because they were dependent on the comic book retailers. The comic book retailers couldn't be open. All of a sudden, they didn't have anybody to distribute to. DC, and so they ended up saying to the publishers, well, we're not taking your books because we got no one to distribute to. So it wasn't that everyone was relying on Diamond. It was that Diamond was relying on comic book retailers as their major source for comic book distribution. I know Diamond Toys is a completely different beast into of itself, and is actually the majority, like that's their major, income generator. So all this stuff is kind of happening. I guess my point is, let change happen. Let's see where the chips fall. So far, DC Fandom, I think, is going to be very, very impressive in terms of media and coverage and news. Let's see what happens. Despite obviously the negative of them, cutting salaries and letting people go.
I don't think it's indicative of the people that were let go. But the industry in and of itself, as a total, and definitely DC, needs to change. Like, everything needs to adapt itself. It needs to try to take what it already has and become something else, something a little more viable, something a little more slick and easy to navigate these days.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the people that they let go were standing in the way of that.
No.
But the only positive thing about all this is that it indicates that the entity's desire to actually start making some of those changes, to actually start doing something new,
right?
Which is a good thing. I wish a lot of people didn't have to be sacrificed in order for that to happen. And I hope it's worth it. I know it won't be worth it to them, but I hope it's worth it industry-wise. So we could continue to see things flourish. And there's some disturbing predictions or assumptions being made about the disparity between the film adaptation and the source material,
right?
And then some of the aspects of Warner Brothers is removing the source material, so you don't have anything negative to compare it to. So now it's all so that's some of the stuff that people are saying, that they're going to diminish the weekly to monthly portion of it.
Yeah,
they're going to concentrate mainly on graphic novels, that kind of circumstance. That's going to drastically alter the way we consume comic books,
right?
In and of itself, they want to go full digital instead of print. That's going to change a lot of things. It's going to put a lot of retailers out of business, or they're going to be specialty stores and stuff. So there's a lot of shakeup coming. There's
something we didn't talk about,
coming.
And we're running up against the clock, but one of the things that we didn't talk about was the AMC deal with Universal Pictures, and how Universal can now can go direct to streaming like 17 days after, and AMC actually gets a piece of that.
The movie in the comic book industry that they're paralleling.
That's how the comic book retailers are going to. I mean, there's going to have to be some sort of. I don't know how I don't know how it's going to happen,
of sale. Like, you're going to only have 2-3 weeks to sell these things as tangible items before they go mainstream, and everybody can get their hands on them.
Yeah, and
that's what you're saying.
And in the digital format, they can get a piece of everything. That's the only way you keep these kind of things alive. Because look, digital is great, but a comic book store, if it's done right, can also build community and can actually kind of like a Comic-Con.
There's absolutely no calculating the loss of some of those retail stores.
Yeah.
Like there's you cannot fathom. I mean, it won't be the end of the world, and that's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate simplification of it. But you can't calculate the loss that there'll be.
Yeah.
You know, it would be tremendous.
We will see as this develops. All right, next week, got a very special guest and/or guests next week. We actually have Renee Geerlings, former editor-in-chief of Top Cow. She's going to be on with her husband, Tyler Mane. We got Tyler Mane going to celebrating X-Men 20th anniversary. The two of them on, lots to talk about. We may end up breaking up the interview, to be honest with you. Not the couple. They're a happy couple. They've been married very many years, and it's a joy to see them develop it.
Well, I've met Tyler Mane, so we ain't messing with that guy, period. You know?
No, but we may break up. We might do separate
with their
interviews.
relationship.
Yeah, we might do separate interviews. We might have them on together.
That'd be the extent of our control over the situation.
Lots
with Tyler
of
Mane.
really cool stuff happening, but over the next week to 2 weeks, Renee Geerlings, Tyler Mane, DC Fandom coming in a couple weeks, New Mutants coming in a couple weeks. We will see you next week.
Rogue Wave.